Hello. Good morning. Welcome. I'm so happy you can join us. While you're arriving, feel free to put in the chat where you're joining us from and your name if you're signed in as iPad or something like that. Wherever you're joining us from, we welcome you. I'm Miriam Diamond. I'm the program director from Encore Boston Network. We help people 50 and over make a difference and have more fulfilling lives through work, service, and action. And today we're going to be talking about the work part. So we have Florida here and some other places, I'm sure. I know we have people from around Boston and New England represented. Okay, Norwood, thank you. Welcome. So you can learn more about our organization at encorebostonnetwork.org. Feel free to check out our other events while you're there and sign up for our newsletter and even membership. I love to say this, it's free. We offer quality things for free. No inflation, no gas tax, nothing. Everything is completely free and it's one of the best bargains available. So please take advantage. This event is being recorded, so we'll send you an email in about a week or so with a link to the recording, to any slides, any follow-up links and resources. Those of you who are not able to join us live will be able to join us that way. And if you prefer to use the closed captioning, if you find that useful, please feel free to turn that on. We encourage you to add your comments, reactions, thoughts, questions throughout the whole program. You don't have to wait till the end. If it's a question, we recommend you write the word question before it so that when we get to the Q&A section, we'll know it'll jump out at us. So now to talk about our main topic today, it's the hybrid world of franchises. And our plan is to describe and demystify franchise operations and encourage you to consider this as a career opportunity. So we're going to talk about franchise opportunities and the range of options. It's not all what you were thinking. It's even broader. And we'll help you identify steps to explore and pursue this career if this is what you would like. Our experts will include the Dana Hall, who is franchise consultant for Franet, a franchise broker, and he'll give an overview of definitions, myths, and truths of franchising. Dana has 20 years of experience working with some of the most successful franchise companies in the country. He assists prospective new business owners in finding the right opportunity for them. He has business background in retail finance, franchise operations, marketing, strategic planning, and hands-on knowledge as a consultant. After that, we'll actually hear from franchisees, Mark Cody, who works for a certified focal point business and is an executive coach, and Armand Buonanno of CMIT Solutions, which offers IT support. So I'll now turn the program over to Dana.
Hey, good morning, folks. Thank you. Let me share my screen here. Give me 1 second. Excellent. There we go. Well, I want to thank Miriam and Doug Dixon from Encore Boston Network for providing this platform, and I appreciate the opportunity to chat with you. So just a real quick cliff notes on who I am. My name is Dana Hall. I am a franchise consultant with a company called Franet. I'll explain that real briefly in a second. I'm a lifelong New Englander. I grew up on the North Shore in Swampscott, Mass. I went to undergrad out in the western part of Massachusetts at North Adams State. I got my undergrad degree there, got my MBA from Suffolk years later at night. I've worked for Wendy's International for about 10 years as a financial analyst. A similar role with Panera Bread for about 8 years, where I was the director of finance for all their retail operations for all their domestic locations, around 1,000 at the time. And I've been a franchise business consultant internally for Orange Leaf Frozen Yogurt, working directly with franchisees to help them improve their business. That's a little bit of background on who I am. Who is Franet? We are a 35-year-old, it's a little dated on the slide, international franchise consulting firm. We have about 100 folks across the US and Canada. We're very proud of the partnerships, which I hope I can now include Encore Boston in that group. But we work very closely with SCORE, which is a service corps of retired executives, and the small business development centers as just as a resource to them and their clients. We work and vet about 250 companies that we would represent to clients. So we provide that service to the people we work with. And we have very close relationships with funding companies because that's obviously a very important aspect of getting a business off the ground. So real quick, what we do, we educate people. Hopefully this is what we're doing today on opportunities in business ownership. We offer our clients choices. Again, we educate, we guide, we counsel. What we do not do is sell. We don't sell anything. We're here to help guide people, help them buy if that's what they're looking to do. So, and we do it at no cost. Let's get into the meat of this. So just as a backdrop, and this is from our experience, I've been doing this for almost 4 years. Again, FranNet's been doing it for 35. Why do people consider it? What is it for you? It's the why, right? So these are the things time and time again we've heard about the ability to be more independent, to have flexibility in your day or your schedule or your life. Oftentimes we have people that are concerned about layoffs in their particular industry. Again, control is a big part of it. And ultimately you determine what success is for you and what is your why. It's usually a combination of these things. But I just want to give people an idea of the reasons that people consider, and Mark and Armin will either confirm or deny some of these when they chat later. So what is a franchise? There's probably a little bit of misconception. There's a couple different connotations to it, right? You hear the term franchise describing something like the Star Wars movies, right? They had all these movies, they have offshoots, they have merchandise. It's literally a billion-dollar business in and of itself. And you hear that referred to as the Star Wars franchise sometimes. You'll hear that in sports, the Patriots franchise, and all that entails. But for our purposes, a franchise is a license. It's a license agreement to use a company's trademarks, intellectual property, their products, if that's appropriate, their business systems, how they go to market, the model, so to speak. It's a license to use that in exchange for an initial franchise fee, an upfront fee, a kind of pay to play, so to speak, and then an ongoing royalty, which is a stream of income where the franchisor, which is the parent company, that's where they're really making their money. They're going to take a percentage of your gross revenue as a franchisee. So that's what a franchise is. It's highly regulated. There's disclosure around it, but it is a legal agreement with a franchise contract, and for our purposes, is what a franchise is. So what are some of the pros and cons with franchising? And we could, in a longer conversation, we could do this with any type of business, whether you're buying an existing one or doing it on your own. But there's pros and cons to it. The good part of franchising is oftentimes there's name recognition, branding, right? There's intellectual property, license and trademarks, websites and marks and color schemes, all that sort of thing. A proven business system. That's really what you're buying, something that's already been tried and true. Robust training and support relative to independent businesses is a lower failure rate. It oftentimes is lower cost, relatively speaking, because you're not iterating and making mistakes and spending money. These things have already been figured out by that franchisor. There's great financing options because they're known companies. It's a known brand. Again, I talked about disclosure. I won't get into that because it's a lot of legal boring for this particular conversation, but there's something called a franchise disclosure document, which every franchisor has to provide you as a potential franchisee, and it's loaded with great information about what you're potentially investing in. And then the other advantage is you have this franchise family. You have the franchisor supporting you, but you also have fellow franchisees that you can lean on and ask questions of and collaborate with. So those are just not an exhaustive list, but some of the advantages. Look, there are disadvantages. There isn't a franchise for everything. There are typically very structured systems. There's a spectrum to that, but that's why they're successful. They have a process. You're plugged into a system. For some people, that's restrictive. They don't like that, right? So that can be considered a disadvantage. There's territory restrictions, oftentimes, not all the time. That can be good. It protects you, but you could view that as it's limiting you. So that could be considered a disadvantage. You can only sell their products. You can't branch out and utilize your franchise to sell, other products. And, it's a trade-off, but you are paying for this. There's an ongoing royalty that you're paying the franchisor through the life of the franchise contract. So just a few pros and cons. Why not just do this myself? And we're going to hear from Mark and Armin about that. And I won't go through all these, but these are some of the things you got to consider. And I get that question a lot from folks, and it's a legit one. And the answer is sure, you can do it on your own. Many people do. It's the American dream. But these are some of the things you'd have to consider if you're going to own a coffee shop that's your own, or you're going to have a management consulting business, or whatever it may be. These are all the things day one you have to start thinking about. And in a franchise, oftentimes many of these things have already been determined, figured out. And again, it gives you a head start. It's not for everybody. Franchising is certainly not for everybody. But these are some of the things you would have to consider if you were going to do it on your own. So let's talk about the three main myths of franchising. That it's all fast food and retail. That's the thing I get all the time. It's Dunkin' Donuts, McDonald's. And yes, probably 1/3 of it is that retail products and services section on this wheel. But there are B2B concepts. There are personal services. There are home services. There are senior care services. So in this country, legally, there are over 3,000 individually franchised companies. That's not locations. These are individual concepts. In 90 some odd industries, and this slide's a little dated, there's probably over 1 million operating units. And what I mean by that is McDonald's is the 800-pound gorilla, right? They have 13,000 locations. So that's what I mean by operating units. Mark and Armin have an operating unit. Now, this is where I, want to give people an idea of it. Again, not just those few things. Senior care, residential repair and home modification, a lot of the cleaning services you see, whether they're commercial or residential, a lot of the hair care and beauty, automotive, the Meinekes and Makos, those are franchise concepts, damage restoration, your ServPros, for instance. And then you got business to business, so staffing agencies, sales training agencies, business coaching, which is what Mark does. So there's a wide variety of concepts, and I want people to take away from this that it isn't just the things that you see driving around in your car that have big signs on the sides of buildings. They're expensive. Well, yeah, relative, depends on your viewpoint of expensive, but I think most people think 7 figures, right? If I'm gonna have a franchise, wow, it's gonna be $1 million investment. And if it's, in my past, a Panera Bread or a Wendy's, yeah, it is going to be that much because you've got a building, a ground lease, equipment, all that sort of thing. But the vast majority are in this sort of, I call it probably 55 to 60% are in that $100,000 to $500,000 investment, depending on what it is. So again, that's still a lot of money, but relative to what often people think it is, over $1 million, it oftentimes is very approachable, far more than what people would initially have thought. This is just very typical. You don't have to have it all in cash. You can certainly finance a lot of this. There are programs for that, but you will have to have some out-of-pocket cost directly liquid. And these are just some of the sources. Just if you're thinking about it, these are very common. All of these, I've had clients use every one of these avenues, and sometimes it's a combination of them. I would just point out the one that most people aren't aware of is that last one, using your retirement savings, which is, kind of initially scary. Like, why would I do that? And oh, by the way, I get taxed and penalized. But the government has a program that's been around for 40 years called Rollover for Business Startup, that you can use part of your 401k or whatever your defined contribution plan is to fund a business, and it's tax and penalty free. Now, I'm not a financial advisor, but I'm an accountant by trade, and I'm very conservative, and I would never recommend, more than a small portion, right? But it could help fund a business, and people often don't realize that's an option. And the last big three one is that, you need to be an expert in whatever it is you do. And it's not necessarily always true. Sometimes it is. But if you're going to own a Meineke, I referred to that, or a Great Clips, which is a low-cost men's haircut concept, the franchisor is not expecting you to know how to fix brakes or cut hair. That's not what they're after. They're after people that will use their system, that have some business acumen, and that have had skills transferred from their past, wherever that may be. Management skills, people hiring, developing, training, marketing, all those other business type skills, that you're going to be the CEO of this little company, this small business. And oftentimes it can't get to the point where you want it by you being in it. You would never be able to scale or grow a business if you're fixing the brakes all the time. You're not managing the business. And you grow by managing more people and growing the top line and working on the business, not in it. The franchisors are going to train you on the key things for the system. They want business people, not tech experts, technical experts for the service. So what if I'm considering this? What are the things I should, really think about? I break it down into 3 steps. First and foremost is separate what does the business do from what I'm going to do as the owner in the business. I work for Panera Bread. They're bakers, right? Every one of those locations has a bakery in there. People that bake love baking, right? They're passionate about it. They like getting their hands on the dough. They like the process of baking. But if you're going to own a bakery, you may not be baking. You're going to be doing payroll. You're going to be doing the order. You're going to be hiring and training people. So you need to really understand what the business does versus what you are going to do as the owner within that business. Now, could you still own a bakery and bake? Sure. But you have to make sure you understand that all those other functions will need to be done by somebody. And the last thing you want is for people to be excited about, the business and what they're going to do every day, and then find out they're doing all these other tasks that isn't as much fun or is not what they expected. So be really clear about what the business does and what you as the owner will do in the business. Once you sort of have that clear, then say, why am I doing this? This is a self-evaluation, self-inventory, so to speak. What is my why? What are my reasons? And be really clear on this. Because again, it has to match. The business has to fulfill these things as you own it for 5, 10 years. So understanding what void needs to be filled. So is it building equity for retirement? Is it, I worked 70 hours a week and traveled every week on a plane. I want more time for family. I want to be more involved in my community. So the business needs to provide that for me. Do a list and sort of really understand what you want the business to do for you. And then the final thing is you're going to need, to have skills that you've taken that can apply to that business, right? So knowing, again, a different self-evaluation, self-inventory, am I really good at sales and marketing? Am I more somebody that's operationally driven? Am I really good at managing people, hiring, and training them, the HR functions? Or am I really good with customers? So this back office stuff, if I can get somebody else to do that, I'm really good at customer service. So knowing what you bring to the table from these skill sets is also critical. And that's the way you can kind of now start to narrow down. And that's what we help people do, narrow down how you would fit into different businesses and what skills are critical for those. So that's just a really high-level overview of franchising. Didn't want to spend a ton of time because what we really want to do is talk to people that are living it. And so Mark Cody and Armand Bonanno are our guests, and we're going to let them share their experiences and their expertise. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen and just have a conversation. So I'd first like to just have you folks introduce yourself and give us a little background. So let's start with you, Mark.
Sure. Thanks very much, Dan. I'm glad to be here today and share a little bit of background and perspective for others that might be considering what's next for them. In terms of my background, I grew up actually in, my father was a second generation business owner. My grandfather was a bit of an entrepreneur. So I always knew that at some point in the future, I might want to be running my own business as well. I had no idea what it was going to be. But my father really suggested, you know what, he had started in the family business when he was 16, so never finished high school, never went to college, but was able to run that business or take it over from my grandfather and run it reasonably successfully for a number of years. But he stressed the fact that go out and get some experience in the bigger companies before you start to try to do something on your own. So that's why I started off my career after getting a business degree at Bentley. I went to join Ernst & Young, or EY, one of the big four accounting firms, so I could really get a good solid foundation of how businesses run, what types of businesses are out there. Spent 8 years there, so I actually really enjoyed it, had some great clients, like the people I was working with, but partnership at a big firm wasn't necessarily right for me. So like you, Dana, I made a shift over into corporate America. And interestingly enough, with a small donut chain that everybody here has probably heard about called Dunkin' Donuts. So I wasn't necessarily looking to get into franchising, but I joined them in a financial role and spent about a dozen years with Dunkin'. And it was really great to see the value that a system could bring to folks who are looking to operate a business. It wasn't intentional. I had no idea I would ever get into franchising on my own after that. But after leaving Dunkin', I was looking for something that maybe had a bit of a higher purpose as well, maybe something I could have more control over, and moved over into biotech and working with a lot of biotech companies who are developing their drugs. More value, I thought, than maybe serving people coffee and donuts. It's probably arguable by some, but really enjoyed that and had the opportunity to start a couple of businesses with some scientific partners when I was over in the biotech space. That was really exciting. Got venture backing for one of those as well, but realize that oftentimes when you take money from a venture capitalist or you do one of those pure startups, it is a massive amount of work. And ultimately, if you're taking outside money, suddenly you become an indentured servant to the venture capitalist or an investor. So a number of years ago, or about 5 or 6 years ago, when some of that business was winding down and I needed to evaluate what was next, I realized that I could go out on my own, but it was an enormous lift. I'd done 2 or 3 of those businesses, creating, like you said, those websites from scratch, the systems from scratch, the marketing from scratch, everything. And said, you know what, I don't want to go that route. And I don't necessarily want to be, all alone around it as well. So somebody introduced me to Focal Point. I'll share more about that in a little bit. But that's kind of my background and how I got here.
Thank you, Mark. How about you, Armin?
Got to mute there. Hi, everyone. Thanks for the invite. My adventure started about a dozen years ago. I worked for a company for 22 years that provided the betting system at racetracks. I was located in Salem, New Hampshire. I don't know, some of the listeners here probably remember Rockingham Racetrack. Mm-hmm. My company provided the betting system, and it was a very nice job, a very little commute, but I wanted to do something. And I think listening to Mark, I guess my grandfather was the entrepreneur of the family. He was a tailor, and he started his little tailor shop, but he expanded it and started selling clothes. So I guess I got a little bit of that from him. So I looked into what I might want to do, and I came across a franchise, actually. At the time, it was a franchise, Geek Squad, which was acquired by Best Buy. Felt comfortable in my job, didn't pursue it really, but it was in the back of my mind. So that was, as I say, about 12 years ago. So 5 years ago, where I was working, the property was sold, was being developed, and I went out on the road. I was given some options of relocating. And in terms of growing up, I grew up in the Merrimack Valley. So I went to high school in Lawrence, Mass. Went to college in North Andover at Merrimack College. I did venture out a little bit for my MBA to Babson, but not too far. So I just was not in a position to relocate. I have 2 elderly parents who, very strong family ties. So 5 years ago, I went looking again, and I said, I should look into something like Geek Squad. I was in technology, but it was really enterprise-based. And a couple of points that Dana really stressed: model and family. So I knew I needed something that would allow me to have the support in a new technology. As we've all experienced in 2 or 4 years, technology changes. You can't buy the same appliance as you did 4 years ago. Things are different, even though it does the same thing. So in the background where technology, where I worked, it moves even faster. So I knew I needed some kind of support moving from an enterprise level, that is big companies. And I really thought the opportunity was in serving small businesses. And what I've discovered and what I initially liked is the sense of family. The home office was very welcoming, it was informative, and then there's a network of other location owners that you begin to rely on, to bounce ideas off of, to learn and grow. And that was apparent pretty early, so that those two things definitely are a plus for franchising. In looking, there were really two, I saw, I think it was Carol in the chat asked technology franchises. In the specific business that I do, we're called managed service providers. We target small businesses. We make sure that their computer systems are up and running, that their data is secure. It really is an offshoot of years ago, everyone coming to the internet in the 90s, business applications becoming more applications, and of course our phones, right? Everyone has their favorite apps. Those things, if they don't run right, there's a crisis usually for the individual, myself included. And that's the need that we try and fill. Of course, you have to really segment. Not everyone is a possible target for us. And that's another thing that Dana alluded to. When you're looking at your market, you need to define who you're going after, how you're going to service them. And the franchise model has it pretty much set. In my industry, there were two major franchisees. So I vetted both and chose CMIT. I would get a quick story if we have another couple of minutes. So CMIT is actually Computer Moms Information Technology. It was started in Austin, Texas, but it morphed into, this was 25 years ago. So again, there was a need for moms to learn how to get on the internet, and a couple of women that in the neighborhood kind of were familiar, were helping others. That morphed into a business where it was focused on small businesses fixing or reacting to problems. 10 years later, that morphed into managed services, being proactive. So just in 25 years, you can see the major changes in one small sector. And again, what I found interesting and important for me when I looked into this is you had the model and you had a network of people that were going to be helping you and also in the same situation, so could share ideas.
So I appreciate both of you giving the background, and I think I know why you guys chose the franchise model, so we won't belabor that. But what I would like to hear from you about what you were doing your diligence, and you alluded to it a little bit, Armand, but I'll start with Mark. What would be the key things for somebody to look for in a franchisor? You're vetting them, they're vetting you. What are the key things that you want to be looking at in a franchisor, in your opinion?
No, really good point, Dana. And one of the things for me is when I look back in my career, I had worked with some, really good companies and some really good leaders and some others that were like, So I knew that, and like any of you who are looking to potentially, become a franchisee or join a system, you can join whatever system you potentially want. So I wanted to make sure that I joined one that I could be proud to be associated with, that actually had a good reputation, that whose values aligned with mine as well, that I didn't feel like I was being sold anything, that I really felt like I was, buying or investing in something that I wanted. So clearly culture and fit is going to be important. Beyond that, and my role is not only am I an executive coach, so I work with my own clients, but I'm also what's called an area representative with Focal Point. So I have conversations with folks who are interested in becoming a franchisee all the time. And what I really like to understand from them is, what do they really want to do? I mean, if you're just getting into something and say, I want to try to make as much money as possible, you might be missing the boat, because you need to show up. This isn't necessarily a job, but treat it like a job or a business or an investment. This is what you're going to be doing. You want to make sure that you're going to enjoy what you're doing as well. So really look to understand, what is the underlying work that you're going to do as a franchise owner or as a business owner with this franchise system. Make sure that aligns with what you want to do as well. And then obviously take a look at the franchise too. Does it provide the systems? What's the history? Make sure you're having conversations with a lot of other franchise owners. What's one of the things that we always recommend? Please talk to 5, 6, 7, whatever other franchise owners who have already been in the system a year, 2, 5, 10 years, to say, how are they doing? And ask them. Hopefully the franchisor is going to introduce you to them. And if they don't, that would worry me. Because there needs to be a lot of transparency. We don't want to feel like we're selling anything. It's a mutual validation process. And when there's a fit, it feels natural. So yeah, culture, fit, make sure it's something that you want to do. Talk to the franchise owners that are already in the system. And look into the support that you get as well. That's one of the reasons I chose franchising. I could have potentially hung up my own shingle as Mark's coaching company, but it wouldn't necessarily have, given me the training. I wouldn't have had the validation that I have now as a certified Focal Point business and executive coach. I wouldn't have had all the intellectual property or the content available that I can ultimately utilize, or a couple of hundred colleagues and other support folks that I could go out to for help along the way. So those are a few of the reasons that I joined a franchise, and specifically Focal Point, because like Armin, I did check out a few other franchise concepts as well. And I felt that the business model at Focal Point was more appealing, attractive, and the culture aligned better with me. But culture and systems might align better on others, depending upon what their needs and desires are. So just some thoughts there for some consideration.
Yeah, thanks, Mark. Anything to add, Armin? And please do. But then what I'd like to ask you is, after that, what, from your opinion or what your experiences are, some of those key challenges, right? This isn't all roses and tulips, right? I mean, there's challenges, right? So let's be real.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
Please share.
And I think Mark did a great job of kind of summarizing. And I go back to my comment about the family and model. In answering this question, your next question, most of us come from experiences and work experiences that are pretty concentrated. As you can imagine, in technology, and I alluded to some of the work that I did, it was very focused. Owning a business is very different. And even during training, one of the phrases I remember was drinking from the fire hose. So it goes back to your slide there, right? We bring certain skills and certain work experience that really you can fit mostly in 1 or 2 squares, but there's 4 or 6 or 8 squares that you're going to be doing, which is very important. Going back to that model, in the franchise model, especially in my experience, you've got that net where you can reach out, and depending on your strengths, but more importantly, your weaknesses, you can get help that kind of gets you through. I had never really hired anyone. So that was an interesting process. Just the legal part of it, and what you can ask, and vetting and things like that. In my industry, it's much more simpler because it's technical, and you can test for skill sets. But that's something that is an example of what I mean. So we bring some experiences that don't necessarily that we haven't had experiences in areas that we're going to have to make decisions and work within. And a side note, sales and marketing. I never really did any sales and marketing. You know, we worked on networks. We fixed problems. We didn't go out and network. So the first time I heard about a elevator pitch, you know, your 30-second elevator pitch, it took me a while to understand what are they talking about. So, you know, those are things that, you know, your franchisee through coaching, through peer groups that are set up are helpful.
Awesome. Thank you for the feedback. So as you know, every business is different. And if you want to add something, Mark, please, but I'd like to hear just a day in the life of a business owner. I know it changes every day, but you know, what can somebody expect?
Yeah, no, Dana, happy to share a little bit there as well. And another point I was going to make, just kind of to build upon what Armin was sharing too, is as you're thinking about, you know, what it is you want to do. Do you want a franchise that actually has a location where you and potentially employees go to a location? Do you want a franchise that potentially is virtual, that you can do from anywhere? And so folks may have seen in the chat, I put that I'm in Naples, Florida. Well, part of what I wanted to make sure that I created for myself in the future was the ability to work from wherever I wanted. I suffered through Boston traffic for 30-something years. And I said, whatever I do next, I do not want to have a daily commute. I don't want to have to be going to a particular location and suffering through traffic or be tied down. I'm at that point in my career where, you know what, our kids are out of the house. My wife likes the idea of flexibility. So I wanted to make sure that I could work from wherever. So as long as I have an internet connection, my laptop and phone, I can work from wherever. So I choose to work the winter months from Naples and the summer months from Duxbury. So I don't have to deal with commutes anymore. For me as well, as I didn't necessarily, I love working with people, but I wouldn't want to worry about, you know, what, supervising or managing folks all the time. So I got into a concept which is more about services that I can provide. I'd run some businesses before where I had been running the business as opposed to kind of having the client facing. I actually wanted to be client facing and be a deliverer of services as well. So those are just a couple of the points maybe to build upon what Armin had shared. Maybe I'll let Armin answer the question and then I'll come back around afterwards as well.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, what's a day in the life, Armin?
Oh, a day in the life. I don't do much of the service delivery. So I in our world, a problem is a ticket that has to be dealt with, and it gets a big long number, and you can trace it or work on it throughout until its conclusion. But I do see them, and you know, they scroll by, and every once in a while you might get a crisis that I kind of keep an eye on. Most of my efforts are the administrative and the sales and marketing. The administrative is sometimes tedious. So, you know, invoicing, billing, making sure that people are paying their bills, making sure that, you're doing everything you need to in terms of taxes and, sales tax monthly, quarterlies, things like that, that as an employee, you never think about. Right? You get your check deposited and that's it. But, you know, now I'm at the other end where I got to make sure that all that is working. So, and I alluded to the networking. That's forever changing. You know, we all went through COVID, so things like this became more and more the norm. For our industry, we were doing a lot of this pre-COVID, and we actually, most of our work is done remotely. It's only rarely, even with operations, that we're on site. If we're on site a lot, it means we're not really doing our job, because we want to prevent, you know, like I said earlier, prevent problems. So learning how to use video for sales, as an example, is something I'm still working on. That's part and parcel of my day-to-day. Just communicating with clients, We're finishing our year, so we're going through and trying to schedule with everyone a recap of the year. I'm doing this actually this week, so it's right on top of my mind. But a lot of stuff that eventually eventually you'll offboard, and I have offboarded some, but others, until you grow to a big enough staff, you're kind of involved in. And, you might be the salesperson or the marketing person or the bookkeeper, or even if you do have a bookkeeping service, I have a payroll service, but, you got to make sure that they have, especially onboarding and, everything is all set. So you got your hands in stuff on a daily basis that touches the different functions.
Yeah. So again, working on the business, not in it. You're
Right.
not fixing breaks, right?
Yeah, you
You're
want to
managing
try
the
and get
business.
yourself out of the business, working on the big picture. And that goes back to what we were discussing, what is it, what got you into it? Why did you decide to do what you're doing? That's what you ultimately want to answer. And day to day, there's a lot of stuff that doesn't immediately impact that, but you grow into that.
What would you add, Mark?
Yeah, so I'm here just to build a couple of things on what Armin's shared. So if you're going into a business, if you're going into like a Dunkin' Donuts or McDonald's, you probably don't have to do a lot of networking because they're going to be spending millions and billions of dollars in advertising. It's going to take you 18 months and a couple $1 million to open up your shop and hire a bunch of employees and so forth, but people start lining up at the drive-through. Most of the businesses that we're talking about here aren't necessarily those. It's those where we, in many cases, are the face of our franchise or our small business that we're running. So clearly networking is going to be important. So they probably need to have a certain amount of, comfort and having, I talk about having conversations with others. I don't ever view myself as selling coaching. It can't be sold. People can buy it or invest in it, but I can't sell somebody on coaching. So it's about having conversations and probably like Armin as well, identifying what are the needs, what are the gaps, and are the services that we offer a natural fit or mix. And one of the things, and I'm sure CMIT does this, because Focal Point does, is we train our franchisees on how to have those productive conversations to see whether there's a fit to warrant an additional conversation, a Zoom meeting, and maybe a strategic business review to determine whether we and the prospective client are a good fit for either business or executive coaching. So networking is clearly part of what we do. So I may attend a couple of networking events a week. I was probably doing more when I was first launching my business, and it was also in person then. These days, since I work summer from the Boston area, winters from Florida, I'm not doing a lot of in-person networking. It's leveraging Zoom. It's leveraging my existing network or contacts, something that we call champions. Champions are those people that maybe you've worked with, worked for, done business with, that know you. And even though they may not be the ones who hired you as either a coach or a managed service provider, they may know somebody that does. So it's important to make sure that you're continuing to cultivate your network if you're thinking about going into one of these types of businesses. So clearly networking and connecting is part of what I do. It's a pretty small part now, but it's a very important part. I also connect with a lot of folks through LinkedIn because basically everybody that's either running a business or is an executive is probably on LinkedIn. It's a really fertile ground for connecting with folks. And I'll do a little bit there, but I've also hired a virtual assistant. So it's very inexpensive for somebody to start, some of those postings, some of those promotions, some of those connections for me. And then when it moves along a little farther along, I can get involved when it's maybe something that's been validated or is real. For me, though, most of my day is spent working with clients as an executive coach. So these are folks, they could be a business owner looking to get their business to the next level. It could be an existing executive who's looking to refine, their leadership skills and their management, or it could be an up-and-coming professional who is maybe, I have a few folks that are probably director or senior director, but their companies see a lot of potential. They've hired me and some of our other coaches to work with these individuals so that they can be more of an influential, functional leader and executive as opposed to just a technician. So that's a lot of what I do these days. And I do all of my meetings essentially through Zoom. If a client needs me to be there in person, like I'll be up in Boston in a few weeks because I have a client, and they want me to attend their leadership team meeting and do a bit of a presentation for them. So I'll do that, but otherwise it's leveraging technology so we can be very efficient in what we do.
Incredible insight. Thank you. Miriam, should we switch to some questions?
That's a great idea. We do have some, and I encourage people, if you have questions, to continue to post them. We have a question about, is there a resource that lists franchises by geography?
So I can take that. Probably not to the extent that I think you're hoping, like a map with, this is what's available. There's so many franchises out there and there's so many moving parts. What I can tell you is that, our website has a list of all the companies that we work with, but by geography, that's part of my job when I'm working with somebody is to once I narrow down something that could potentially fit, a small group of concepts, we'll have to formally do what we call territory checks and talk with the franchisor to make sure that something's available there. So it's really hard to give you a list by geography, just for the sheer volume of concepts that are out there.
And to the panelists, you've talked a lot about the flexibility and how that's been a big plus. Is there anything else that you find most enjoyable about being a franchise owner?
Armin, do you want to go first?
Sure. Well, you're a business owner. And one of the main reasons I got into it is because I wanted to build something and be in control. And that's what you have. So you make the decisions on who you hire. You make the decisions on what you sell. You make the decisions ultimately, networking or sales and marketing that lead to clients. And you're the one that really is the starting point as to delivering services and making customers satisfied ultimately, right? I mean, was it Truman that says, the buck stops with me? So you kind of either like that or you don't, but that's the reality, especially when you're starting out and it's, you and a couple of other people. As you grow, you can look at things in at a higher level, but I don't think that ever goes away.
I know, Armin, good point. So the other thing, in terms of enjoyable, I guess the benefits are you have a tremendous amount of flexibility. This is your own business. You can choose to invest whatever time, talent, energy in it. You can, in many cases, depending upon the concept, you can choose to do it from wherever you want. Sometimes you're not limited by geography. I know with me, one of the things I always enjoyed when I reflected back on my career and decided to kind of go in this route, what I always loved doing is working with others to help them be more successful. I found that's when I got the most amount of joy and engagement. It was less about me, advancing, but helping my team members, colleagues, advance. And so these days, as a business executive coach, that's my focus, to help my clients achieve their goals so that they can accomplish or achieve success for themselves in their organizations as well. And what I find is really rewarding is when a client shares with me, Mark, if I wasn't talking to you about these types of things, I wouldn't be talking to anybody about this. Or, thank you so much for what you've helped me do or accomplish. And they're paying me thousands of dollars per month to do that, but yet they're thanking me for helping support them on their journey to, a higher level, more success in their business. So those are, really, really both professionally and personally rewarding.
Great.
Excellent.
We have a question for you, Dana. What causes a franchise unit to fail? I hope that doesn't happen too often. And is there an ability to purchase a distressed franchise unit at a discount?
Two-part, great question. So I would tell you that on the first part of that question, the top 3 reasons that franchise units fail. One is that they're under capitalized. And that happens all the time, especially with small, I'm not talking about somebody that's signing a 20-unit development agreement to open 20 Paneras. Those people are already millionaires, right? And they have all sorts of funding sources. When you're talking about what we're talking about, true small businesses like Mark and Armand, a lot of these people come in and they spend every dime just to pay the franchise fee to get the doors open, and they don't have any working capital. And no business makes profit day one. You have to be able to survive the 3 months, the 6 months, maybe 9 months, right, before you're turning a profit or even breaking even. So that's number one. Number two is location. For a location-based business, if you pick, both these gentlemen don't have that, right? They're virtual. It's not about the 4 walls location. But if you're in that kind of business and you pick the wrong spot, that can be failure often. And I'll tell you, this is going to sound crazy, but it's true. The third biggest reason, people getting into the franchise system and then not following it. They get in and they say, oh, I can do this better, I can do that better, I got my own way to do this. And I when I do a longer version of this for partners, I talk about, the idea of, if you're creative, if you're somebody that always has a different way of doing something, there's nothing wrong with that. Franchising might not be for you. So not following the system, oddly enough, there are people that spend the money and do it and then go their own route. So as far as a distressed one, yeah, that does happen. It's obviously very tricky because, an existing business, not to get into the weeds on numbers, but, it's what you pay for something is a function of its cash flow, right? And so there's a multiple that you pay on that. So that could be navigating that and getting the right data and getting accurate financials, and, that can be tricky. But there are opportunities where somebody has to sell for a personal reason, God forbid, or they just didn't have the time to do it, or they didn't have the expertise, and they get in over their head. Yeah, they're not common, but they do exist.
Okay, well, thank you. So can all of you talk a little bit about what kind of support is available after you're trained, after the initial onboarding of the franchisee, I guess that would be you. What happens as you continue with your business?
I'll let you guys address that.
Go ahead, Mark.
All right, thanks, Armin. Yeah, so really great question, because a lot of times when you're investing into a franchising system, it's about what do you get? And one of the things that you get is how to run your system or how to run your business. So I'll just share with Focal Point. If somebody signs on with Focal Point, typically there's a couple of weeks of, onboarding, getting ready for certification. And we actually have a really comprehensive, 6-day live certification program that will then prepare that franchise owner to launch the business. But after those 6 days, they are not over. So, because we actually have several programs that go 10 to 12 weeks after. It's not necessarily full days, but it's maybe an hour or 2 hours per week for 3 or 4 different programs to help them on, being a better salesperson, how have those right conversations. What are they doing around their sales and marketing initiatives, and what best practices are out there? The types of conversations that you might be having. So you practice those literally for 10 to 12 weeks after. The other thing is, we're a coaching organization. We believe in coaching. Every single new coach gets a coach assigned to them who works with them on their own business, and they'll meet with that coach a couple of times a month. We also have, ongoing training and support programs. Not everybody gets trained on the business coaching curriculum first, but then once you're in a few months, you can get trained on the executive coaching. You can get trained on the Focal Point training programs. You can participate in others. So it continues to grow. Armin mentioned a phrase, what you're drinking from the fire hose. Our franchisees drink from the fire hose up front, but then we turn it down a little bit to let them catch up, but then we continue to build on it as well. So we don't necessarily just turn off the spigot. And then even when you are in an area where it has an area rep like myself, I get together with each of my franchisees at least twice a month for about a half hour and have a team meeting where we're talking about wins, best practices, sharing ideas, collaborating. We're a very collaborative or very engaged franchise. So it's not like we're competing with each other, but how do we work with each other so we all get better? So a couple of thoughts in terms of, what that looks like after you join.
Oh, you're
Armin, did you
muted,
wanna
Daniel.
add?
Yeah, I know. Darn, I said I wasn't going to do that. I'd love to hear from you though, too, on that, Armin, because that's a really important question.
Yeah, it is. And again, it goes back to model and family, summarizes it for me. If you look at the model, what my particular franchisee provides ongoing is a vetting process for new services. I mentioned how technology changes quickly, and a easy example that I could use is with hacking being more prevalent, ransomware being in the news the last couple of years, the next level of cybersecurity protection has been introduced, and others, I'm sure, in the coming years will be introduced. If I wanted to really provide a service that would help better protect businesses 24/7, I'd have to hire 8 or 10 people. Would be challenged just finding, right? In that industry, there's more jobs than people. So I really wouldn't be able to keep up with something that is important and a big trend in my industry. I can do that through the partners that CMIT has and the structure that CMIT has. So that's ongoing. It's really an operational service support as well as some general business support. I'm not vetting these new applications. They're being brought to me after a selection process, and that is very good, very important. As far as the general business, I mean, we had coaching for the first year. We were mandated to take certain training that focused on sales and marketing. We are put into peer groups. So my peer group I've been with them 3.5 years. There's 12 of us. We meet every other week. We have a limelight process, which is very interesting. We actually go through and vet for 2 days, each of us, all aspects, the people, the service delivery, the finances, the marketing and sales. And we all learn through that process. And in addition to that, I have calls with groups of other franchisees, one that is local, one that through, interactions throughout the years, we've kind of gotten to know each other, and we talk once a week. And that wouldn't have been as easy had I not been in a franchise network that actually promoted it, right? We went through class as a group, and that first year we stayed kind of in contact as a group, but then that mentality kind of stays with you. And as you meet other franchisees, you form, these pockets of friendship, let's call them. But it's all business oriented, and it really does help, so you always have an ear when you're facing a business issue or a specific technical issue.
So it's a good thing to know that you're not on your own, as you might be if you had your own operating business.
That's right.
Yeah. So it's time to wrap things up. I know we could continue, but I want to thank you all so much. Dana, Mark, Armin. I also want to thank Kendra Mrozik, our administrative coordinator and technology expert, for making this all happen. I encourage you, if those of you who are joining us, to feel free to add in the chat what you heard today that will be helpful for you and how you can go forward in your exploration of this opportunity in your career. Again, I would like to remind you that the session has been recorded. You will receive a recording. So if there's something you missed or you want to hear again or you want to share with someone else, please feel free to do that. We'll also share the slides, Dana's slides, with you. In the meantime, feel free to take a look at the Encore Boston Network website again to look for resources, information on other topics, upcoming events, sign up for our newsletter. Again, join us for free. Talk about being part of a supportive community. That's what we offer you to help with your interests, your career development, how to use your time in a way that gives you purpose. Some of the upcoming events, a number of you mentioned on the panel LinkedIn. We're having a special event on that coming up. How to make networking fun and successful. Next week, we're going to hear from age-friendly employers looking to hire. So if you're not ready to start a franchise next week and you're still job hunting, you can always see what they have to offer. And something a little different, charitable giving. How to decide who to give, what to give, who to give to, and how to plan for Giving Tuesday that's coming up. So thank you from Encore Boston Network, all of you, for participating. And I wish you much success and a wonderful day.
Thanks very much, folks. Take care.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye, everyone.